Hello there, I'm the serial plagiarist, and I'm very sorry this review is completely overdue, but I was writing this series with another guy, but he's been busy for months, so I figured, you know what, fuck it. I guess I'll just have to go on without him, because otherwise this series will not be finished in a timely manner, and there's already a gap between this review and the previous game Jedi Outcast. With that being said, Jedi Academy is the last entry in the Jedi Knight series of video games. It wasn't intended to be the last, but LucasArts had a massive audit in the mid-2000s thanks to one Jim Ward, and so many projects were cancelled. I'm talking stuff like Imperial Commando, among other games. But we're not here to talk about what never was. We're here to talk about Jedi Academy. And to be honest, I'm happy to say that for a series with 5 games, not a single one of them sucked. Sure, they've all got dated design, but what 90s or 2000s video games don't have dated design? Jedi Academy is quite easily the most playable game for modern audiences, but that's not to discredit the previous 4. Jedi Academy actually alleviates a lot of the criticisms I have about the whole series previously. Even though this is a revamped Jedi Outcast in gameplay, there's a lot of improvements to not just the combat, but the level design and overall structure of the game. This game is not above criticism, as no game is perfect, but hey, Jedi Academy is still a classic, and in this video, I'll be explaining why. So let's get into it. Jedi Academy has a simple main menu without music, just like every other game in the series. Since this game is built off the skeleton of Jedi Outcast, I don't want to re-explain the gameplay too much, save for the stuff they improved. Something interesting about this game is that you get to customize your main character, Jaden Korr. I had no idea that Jaden was a gender-neutral name prior to playing this. You can actually play as a human, all the way to a Keldor or a Zabrak, although for both genders, human is the only mutual selectable one. This game reuses assets for the player character, so if you don't choose to play as a Rodian for example, you're going to see Rodian background characters. For the sake of this review, I'm going with Jaden Korr's canonical face, which was established to be this Caucasian brown-haired, blue-eyed guy. The clothes were whatever for me, as I didn't care about playing as the default, and then when we customize our lightsaber, it can be from a variety of hilts, plus every in-game color minus red. I felt like being a bad motherfucker, so I went with purple. While limited, I did like how they offered to make the protagonist for this game your own through a customization system. It doesn't really change the game, but it's nice to play as a Rodian for example. What other game can you play as a custom Rodian? Anyways, after you create your character and his civilized weapon, we of course get the opening crawl, which of course I miss from modern Star Wars shit. I don't know why Disney got rid of it. So anyways, this game takes place 10 years after Endor, and 2 years after Jedi Outcast. The setup is simple and to the point. The Imperial Remnant is being further pushed back by the New Republic, and Luke is restoring his new Jedi Order on Yavin 4, and a promising student, Jaden Korr, is invited to train as a Jedi after doing the unthinkable, creating his own lightsaber without formal Jedi training in the matter. Does this make Jaden a Mary Sue? No! And that's because you don't need Force training to build a lightsaber. It's plausible that Jaden got some instructions on top of hard work to do it. The story starts with that, and it tells us right off the bat that Jaden really wanted to be a Jedi. Anyhow, we get a cutscene of a transport being taken to the Jedi Academy. There was a glitch where the screen kept blinking in and out, and basically, 2 of the major characters are set up here. And to be honest, it's not the strongest start. This game perhaps has one of the worst pre-Disney Star Wars characters I've ever seen. Rosh Pennon. Who is completely immature and acts like a 5-year-old in all of his scenes. The voice actor has been in a bunch of Star Wars games, including Knights of the Old Republic, but his performance here is completely over the top. He worked as Dustil, for example, but here, nada. Our first impressions of him are not good. He intrudes on Jaden's space, and even though this game was released in 2003, they give the cue that Jaden is completely uncomfortable. It becomes so much more awkward if you play as female. Trust me, even if both interactions are completely the same, no matter what you look like, whether or not Jaden has a dick or not. They were probably going for some character building, but the best thing we get out of this scene is seeing how annoying Rosh is. He berates Jaden with questions, and it feels like a forced way to get some interaction. I would suggest a more natural way for the conversation to start, because Rosh intrudes on Jaden, who is minding his own business. Rosh does a lot of speaking in this scene. His name is Rosh, he's excited, he's nervous, and it feels like he's underestimating the hardships of a Jedi, even under a more lax Grand Master like Luke Skywalker. That's not bad on its own. After all, Anakin Skywalker was much like this in A Phantom Menace. But as I said, Rosh is so immature, loud, and obnoxious, and believe me, it does not get any better. Anyways, when Rosh asks Jaden how he got his lightsaber, he's unable to give out the story because the shuttle they're on is hit and they crash land in the jungles of Yavin 4. As such, the shuttle's pilot contacts Luke Skywalker, who informs the pilot to lead everyone to the nearby Massassi Temple, while we see a red Twi'lek sneak into Luke's computer and steal stuff from it. As such, we are ready to play the level, and it's nothing too hard. A major improvement from the previous games is that you get your lightsaber right away, no questions asked, you just get it. And you value your lightsaber a lot because of it. It's your main weapon for most missions, and on top of the Force, it makes the game more consistent the whole way through. Jedi Outcast's first act was a completely different act from the rest of the game. Not that it was bad, but the shift in gameplay was a bit much. Here, the game feels consistent the whole way through. Of course, there's progression throughout the game, and increasing challenge and whatnot. It's not samey, but it's a good improvement from Jedi Outcast. Mysteries of the Sith was an improvement on the level design from Dark Forces 2, and you can say the same here. From the switch to id Tech 3 with Jedi Outcast, and the spin-off sequel Jedi Academy. So anyways, equipped with our lightsaber, we cut down a tree to make a path for Rosh, and we hike across the jungle. I don't know if this is an oversight, but you are given level 1 saber throw as your only force power. It's useful for taking out the jungle creatures as they screech out of their asses, and you take damage if you get too close. After Rosh demonstrates that he has limited force training, which doesn't really make sense canonically, the whole level is hiking across the jungle. They keep things simple for the start. The jungle creatures are sort of annoying, but thanks to your saber throw, you can dispatch them more easily. Afterwards, the pair encounter stormtroopers, and after taking them down, we get a base level 1 Dark Jedi. Even without the Force, he is your first challenger with a lightsaber, although he is easy to take down. You then proceed to approach the Massassi Temple, climb up, and see a woman holding a beaming scepter, along with 2 buff guys doing something. One of the buff guys notices you, and so the woman redirects the scepter to you, and Jaden is knocked out. Then, because we can't have a Jedi Knight sequel without him, Jaden, when he wakes up, is greeted by Katarn himself. Carl displays his confidence and charisma, welcoming you to the life of a Jedi, and Jaden describes what he saw to the best of his ability concerning the glowing scepter, although it's not enough information to go with. Luke Skywalker shows up and orders everyone go back to the Jedi Academy, and he asks Kyle to stay here and investigate. Now, I just love Kyle in this scene. You can tell he knows Luke so well that he knows what he's gonna say before he says it. Like when Luke says he senses a disturbance in the Force, Kyle responds,
"You always sense a disturbance in the Force."
And then it's on to the next scene. Now, this game provides one of the biggest fantasies of any Star Wars fan when they're a kid, learning the ways of the Force and becoming a Jedi. Luke welcomes everyone and explains that due to limited masters, there will be multiple apprentices to one master. And as you might expect, Jaden and Rosh are paired up with Kyle. Rosh, being the overexcited, immature annoyance that he is, starts trying to suck up to Kyle, and you, as Jaden, can't help but think what the hell is wrong with Rosh. And the thing is, we never find out. Rosh is given no exploration or depth beyond wanting to be a Jedi and to learn the ways of the Force so badly. We don't know why he sucks up to Kyle so much, why he's so immature, and so on beyond the writers deciding to make him annoying. So with that being said, Jaden and Rosh go out to the training grounds to learn the Force. With that, we move on to the area and we learn the basics of the Force. We get an instant level 1 in all Force powers, including push, pull, speed, jump, and sense, and we actively test them out. To be honest, on repeated playthroughs, this part isn't that interesting, but a good thing about all the levels in this game is that they never go on for too long. The pacing is rather well done, and you never feel like you're having your time wasted. And the checkpoint system is really loose, but aside from that, I greatly enjoyed the whole experience. Really, the only story-worthy part in this level besides the end is when Rosh decides to activate one of the training droids on us. Jaden afterwards is incredibly annoyed after that hassle, and upon reaching the end, Rosh asks if he won. Kyle of course tells him that it wasn't a competition, then proceeds to scold Rosh for his poor judgment to activate the droid, as it would have killed Jaden if it was set to Luke's training regiment. Jaden is understandably pissed, but Kyle tells him to keep his anger in check, and so Jaden forgives Rosh. The way this is presented, the path they're setting for the characters is way too obvious. Rosh continues to be annoying by leaning on Kyle, who clearly doesn't like being leaned on. Luke comes in and reveals that the dead Dark Jedi that Jaden killed had symbols dating back to Marka Ragnos, a Sith Lord who died 5,000 years ago, and so far, that's their only clue. So yeah, this faction we're dealing with are the Disciples of Ragnos, a Sith cultist group. You think they'd be doing some unnerving cult stuff or something, but it's actually pretty underwhelming. I'd just like to say that the story doesn't really matter much in this game beyond just context, and the attention was mostly spent on the actual game for all the improvements, but I still wanted to talk about it. So past that point, we get onto the side missions before we can even think of progressing the main story. Yeah, so that's what I meant when I said the story was more of an afterthought. On the other hand, these side missions introduce variety, and are mostly 10 to 15 minute adventures that you can easily go back to, and you can play them in any order you want. There's 3 tiers for all 3 levels of Force usage, and a neat thing is that you can choose to level up secondary Force powers. Since these missions are completely standalone, I'll just describe in detail each one of them individually. I'll also be doing them in order. This game is a callback to the films in many ways, and that's why the first mission takes place on Tatooine. Apparently there have been mercenaries spotted in Mos Eisley who work for the Disciples of Ragnos, and so Jaden goes with Kyle to investigate. Side note, forget about Rosh. You don't go on any missions with them. And with that, upon arriving at Mos Eisley, we see all the mercenary ships. On top, of course, the Millennium Falcon. Told you this game had a lot of fan service. Kyle says he'll be going around the cantina to ask questions, and so Jaden is left on his own. After waiting for presumably a while, Jaden bumps into who else but Chewbacca. Han Solo never makes an appearance in this mission, but basically Jaden and Chewie team up to take on the mercenaries. Now the standard mercenaries are pretty much the same as stormtroopers, just with a skin change, but we also get a bunch of alien enemies. We proceed to fight with Chewie against the mercenaries, who lock the whole area down, and the momentum is pretty moderate. It's just a typical slashing mission against easily defeatable enemies, and that's not to say there's not any challenge, because you'll sometimes come across those sniper Rodians, and there's even the Dark Jedi at the end. The backdrop of Mos Eisley is pretty faithful to the films, although obviously outfitted to be the level that it is. When we've killed everyone, Kyle comes back and congratulates us. He pieces together that the Disciples of Ragnos are probably working with the Imperial Remnant, given the mercenaries we killed aren't cheap. With that being said, however, that's the mission. The next mission takes place on Tatooine. Again. Yeah, so we've got another mission on the planet with 2 suns. I guess I criticized the game there for not having a different planet, but thankfully, this is the only time we return to a planet in the side mission segments. This mission takes us to the more rural areas of Tatooine. Apparently, we're supposed to retrieve a droid from some Jawas before its memory wiped. Since we're on rural Tatooine, we encounter hordes of sand people. They come with gaffy sticks and projectile weapons alike. There's also a bunch of innocent Jawas you can kill if you feel like being a dick, and we're taken across the hills, killing those Tusken savages that cause us problems until we get to the Sandcrawler. The Sandcrawler interior is actually kinda interesting, as you have to solve a bunch of mini puzzles, retrieve the droid, and then kill those animals.
I hate them!
It's after this point that we literally get our only interaction with Rosh, and boy, if there was ever a lack of subtlety, this would be it. Rosh asks a fellow unnamed student whether he feels like he's being held back, because Rosh expresses frustration that Kyle is holding him back, and yada yada. Looking at this scene years after I first played this game, it hasn't aged any better. This is such an obvious setup, and it's frankly ridiculous they tried to keep us in suspense later on. You'll see what I mean. This is topped off with the fact when Kyle himself comes in, and Rosh keeps what he said a secret. So yeah, next we go to the planet Bakura, which is featured in the EU novel Truce at Bakura, which I haven't read yet, so I'm probably missing a lot of context, but basically there's been a disturbance on the world, so we're sent to investigate. Despite being ordered to wait for Kyle to show up, Jaden gets fed up with waiting, and given the situation may be urgent, Jaden chooses to go and investigate. As soon as he goes inside the facility and looks through the security camera, he sees that the Imperial Remnant has planted bombs all across. And it becomes a situation reminiscent of one of the Die Hard movies, where you gotta stop them. Most of the enemies you'll face are Imperials, and the level is really simple, albeit unclear, since I kinda struggled to memorize where all the bombs are. Thankfully there's no time limit, so I fortunately could take as much time as I needed. Aside from some trip mines, you probably won't take any serious damage, and this is probably one of the least memorable side missions, as there's not really any urgency, and it becomes sort of frustrating to find all the bombs. However, once you're done with that, you return to your ship, and Kyle apologizes for not showing up. The end. Alright, so next comes my no joke, least favorite mission in the whole game, and if you've played this game, you know what I'm talking about. A merchant ship was attacked by the Remnant and crash landed on a planet named Blengil, if that's how you pronounce it. The planet is thought of as being completely uninhabited, but when you go over to the planet, you also crash land due to some severe lightning or something. Jaden sarcastically remarks how great the rescue mission is going, before he walks out onto the surface. He calls out for any survivors, and thankfully, there is one guy who in a panicked voice runs over to you. But unfortunately, we get the side of this thing. The thing proceeds to devour the survivor,
And it's gone.
and that's the setup for the mission. Now, with signifying what you're doing, it's perfectly fine. The problem, however, is that it turns Jedi Academy into a nightmarish horror game for this one mission. In a lot of horror games, you're completely stripped of your power, and the same is true here from a certain point of view. You've still got the Force, but given you're still at level 1, you can't jump that high, and Force speed is more limited. You'll catch on pretty quickly that the sand is a death trap, and you want to spend as little time touching the sand as possible. Otherwise, you're going to be eaten. The anxiety I felt in this mission was high, as I was forced to collect parts from the wreckage to repair my ship. You can only hold the repair parts one at a time, so you'll often be returning to your ship. The sandworm is pretty much the threat you'll be facing. The game forces you to be strategic on how you collect the repair parts that are out on the sand, requiring you to use both force, speed, and jump. Now, the level is admittingly pretty engaging that way, but since it turns the whole thing into a nerve-wracking experience, it's why I don't like it. I always dread coming back to this mission, and sometimes I just start the game with level 2 force powers, as this level is far from tame. We learn after the mission that apparently the sandworms are called sand borrowers, but at least we're told that the Coruscant government is going to mark the world as hazardous. So yeah, now we've got our final level 1 mission, and after the nightmare we just went through, we ironically finish off with one of the best missions in the game. This one takes place on Corellia, and right off the bat, we get some excitement. We board a tram that is accelerating at a ridiculous rate, and discover that the tram's been hijacked, so the Disciples of Ragnos can play out their own version of 9/11, but with trams. The environment is probably the best out of all the levels. It's raining, and there's actually some reaction to going up against the rain. We come across numerous thugs and mercenaries, and the momentum is pretty strong. as we're required to get to the front of the tram to stop it from accelerating. I was reminded a bit of Spider-Man 2 here. This level is great because not only is the threat well established, but it feels exciting. The enemy variety is pretty good, and actually having an animation when facing the rain was nice attention to detail. So yeah, a pretty superb level, and with that, we're on to our next story mission. Luke gathers everyone, and discusses how someone sliced into his personal records and found out about places where he felt a strong connection to the Force. Rosh, being the twat that he is, smugly asks,
"What could they get from that besides a tour?"
Wow, what an asshole.
Luke suspects that the Disciples of Ragnos are draining the Force somehow, given the aura from the Masasi Temple was gone after the Scepter people showed up from earlier in the game. So yeah, for some unknown reason, the Disciples of Ragnos are using that mysterious scepter to drain the Force from certain areas, and they seem to be doing it from all over the galaxy. So Luke assigns everyone to their own mission. Kyle goes to the Valley of the Jedi, obviously, and the overconfident Rosh is excited that he's finally getting some real action, and dismissively doesn't care about the cult's motives. Jaden in fact has to remind him that they're not full Jedi yet, they're all just students. Anyways, Luke sends Jaden to Hoth, where he had a vision of Obi-Wan Kenobi. As well as that, he sends Rosh to the remains of the planet Biss, which was destroyed in Dark Empire. And with that being said, we're all off to our respective missions. Rosh smugly wishes us good luck and to call him if we need any help. And with that, we head to Hoth. Upon arriving to the ice world, Jaden spots a light beacon. Now what's cool about this mission is that you can get on any Tauntaun you like and ride it. You can in fact use your lightsaber or blaster on top of that. You will inevitably come across snowtroopers, and that's where you know the Empire is here. They're not the only enemies, however, as you will soon enter a cave with a hungry Wampa, and you gotta kill it. The size and scale of the thing is really put into perspective. It's huge compared to you, and it's pretty intimidating. Afterwards, you'll eventually kill more snowtroopers, avoid an ATST, and make it inside the interior of a facility. After that, you'll fight your way to get to Echo Base, and you'll have to find a secret entrance to make it inside the actual base. The ambience throughout all of this is pretty good at replicating The Empire Strikes Back, and when you get inside the base, you'll feel the vibe of an abandoned military base, overrun by the wrong people. Then you'll spy on a Dark Jedi telling a mysterious person named Alora about how after looking through Rogue Squadron's flight patterns after the evacuation, they determined that Luke went to Dagobah, and after killing the Dark Jedi, Jaden decides to have a look around for Alora. We do eventually come across her, and she's a smug, irritating shit talker, and so it's only our best interest to fight her. To describe how the boss fight went, I was pretty weak as a level 1 Jedi. I opted to keep my distance, and wait until Alora did something like a lightsaber throw that left her defenseless so I could get a free hit. I'm the sort of player who cheats the system if I can make things easier. Ironically, one of the easiest ways to get a free hit on a lightsaber wielding enemy is to use Force Grip on them, which will shortly deactivate their lightsaber and potentially give you enough time to get a free hit. I'm pretty sure the game designers built the game in a way to be more challenging, but hey, if I can do it, it's part of the gameplay. I've started using this tactic for ages since I started playing this game, and that's because it works. Alora flees when we defeat her, and we're forced to go back to the Jedi Academy. Jaden proceeds to inform Luke and Kyle on what he knows, and after Luke briefly explains Yoda's self-imposed exile, Kyle explains that everyone except Rosh has been accounted for. Of course. Luke senses that he's still alive, but let's be real, I don't think anyone's upset that Rosh is absent for the next segment of the game. I never liked him, and it's a breath of fresh air that he's missing. With that being said, however, we are promoted to the rank of apprentice, and we are leveled up to level 2 force powers, as well as our next set of 5 side missions. Believe it or not, but that level 2 upgrade greatly assists the enjoyability of the game, and as well as that, the missions get more intricate and challenging. So let's go through all of them. Our first mission is to some cesspit world named Nar Crater, in which a bunch of elders went to see a Hutt crime lord, but never returned. So we've got to investigate. Jan Ors is the pickup, while we as Jaden are the escort for whatever prisoners we find. It seems like a simple rescue mission, but it comes with a twist. And that's what makes it interesting. When we unlock the cell to the first batch of prisoners, upon approaching them, we find out what the hut had in store for them. A hungry Rancor appears out of nowhere, and we gotta run to safety. Upon making it to the exit area, one of the prisoners gives us a key card he stole, and tells us to free the other elders. Now, since I've played this game a million times, I know how to complete this mission as quickly and efficiently as possible. I basically went through all levers to free the prisoners, and then I escorted them one at a time. I didn't have to worry about the Rancor, since it would have been holed up near the area we had to escape, and the trick is to lure the creature away so the prisoners can escape. The game is a bit lenient and allows a few of the elders to be eaten, but if too many of them die, it's game over. This mission in general is not one of my favorites, and in fact, I used to dislike it. But when I figured out how to rig the level in my favor, I'd say it's more of a mid-tier mission then. Anyways, that's my critique of that particular level. Let's move on to the next. The next mission is rather exciting and unique. We're supposed to meet up with a contact who knows something about the Disciples of Ragnos. Simple enough setup, but with that being said, what makes this level interesting is that it's done mostly on speeders. Yeah, that's right, this is a vehicle-based level, in which we proceed to speed across a wide yet linear path, all the while avoiding mercenaries sent to kill us. What I like is that you have three means of attack. The speeder guns themselves, your lightsaber to take out enemies who get too close on the side, and the E11 blaster, which you can use to shoot on the side. I guess the main criticism I have is that there's only one checkpoint, and it happens too early on in the level. It only took me around a minute to get to the contact's place, and to make a long story short, he gets sniped before he can reveal anything. And that's where we get the checkpoint, in which we got a ride to safety, which took me around 5 to 6 minutes on my successful run. Yeah, that's right, this mission lasts for roughly 7 minutes if you know where you're going, and you get the checkpoint at minute 1 rather than around the halfway point. That means that playing this game organically, you're likely to screw up, and I did. Check this part out, where I had to use the boost button to make it across without dying, and I almost made it. But almost there was not good enough and I died in a dramatic fashion. It actually almost felt like a movie moment there. And since I didn't quick save, I had to start from the checkpoint all over again. So yeah, I wish the mission had the checkpoint split in half of the mission's runtime. That's my criticism. Otherwise, it's great. Your speeder likely won't last forever, so you'll have to switch if your speeder gets too damaged. As such, that's the mission. Race and fight to the end. Simple, straightforward, to the point, and most of all, fun. Next comes the planet Krildor, in which we gotta disrupt the Imperial Remnant station there, where Jantilles himself is our guide through this whole mission, as he and Rogue Squadron work with us to take out the facility. We have to land, and then place beacons so that Rogue Squadron can bomb them. Yeah, we are given the location to place the bomb, and since there's no mini-map, if you forget where to place the bomb, you're not going to be told again, so it's important that you watch the cutscenes. Aside from that, the mission is straightforward and packed with enough enemies to provide a decent challenge. It's a good thing we're the ground support, but I don't think the engine could properly support X-Wing combat given its clunky nature with vehicles. Like, the speed is controlled just fine, but it could have been better, you know. There isn't a lot to say. It's sort of like the mission at Bakura, except with a little more flair and less hard to find the detonation spots if you pay attention to the cutscenes. Although, like the last mission, the checkpoint system is terrible, coming very late into the mission. You'll also come across jet troopers.
Oh, they fly now! They fly now? They fly now!
Yeah, you knew I was gonna pull that joke. The jet troopers are kind of annoying if you're used to lightsaber combat, and you're gonna need to whip out a weapon and shoot them, and they are bullet sponges on top of that. Anyhow, that's the mission. Just plant bombs all over the facility, and then deactivate some bombs the Remnant place to get rid of their resources to avoid the New Republic from taking them. That's the mission. Next comes one of my favorites, because once again, it's a level with a straightforward objective. There's a crime lord on Coruscant named Lanik Rakdo, who is supplying the galaxy with illegal assassin droids. Although he obviously doesn't go quietly, as he literally rigs the bridge to his estate or whatever, and blows it up, so we've got to do things the hard way, killing his thugs and some of the assassin droids he had produced. I see why they required a Jedi to do all this, given Rakdo's presumably dangerous reputation. He's a one-off character, but still. Yeah, so this mission is going all across Coruscant and making it to Rakdo's estate. And when we catch up to him, he pulls some of the assassin droids on us, requiring us to take them all out. The droids have electrical shields that harm you if you get too close, but if you've got Force Lightning, you can actually take them out rather quickly and arrest Rakdo, who spills the beans at the factories hidden on Nar Shaddaa, and we proceed to shut it down in the end mission briefing. Then comes the last mission before the next story mission. We're sent to some hideout Imperial base, except when we get there, we are immediately held at gunpoint and forced to surrender. However, the commander in charge of the base, Rax, decides that he's so goddamn bored that he's gonna let us out for a game of Hunt. This guy is a complete idiot, and so our goal is to show him how poor his judgment was. So yeah, for this entire mission, we are stripped of our lightsaber, which sort of changes how this level is played. In every other mission, the lightsaber was our top weapon, but now that it's been taken from us, we have to rely on ranged weapons. We quickly collect them as there's some convenient E11 sticking by the wall after Rax lets us out. You might think this might make everything more like Jedi Outcast's first third, but that's not completely true, because we've still got one effective weapon on our side. The Force! Yeah, so although we don't have a lightsaber, we can still push and pull enemies, jump around, slow down time with Force speed, and so on. I invested in a lot of dark side powers, so I was able to electrocute countless enemies, and with level 3 Force Lightning, it causes them to be launched out like a catapult. Still, this level is pretty well designed, as Rax taunts us as we make progress. We can control the ATST in this mission briefly, and there's a large variety of enemies, all building up to a climactic boss fight with Rax. Equipped with the most powerful range weapon in the game, we have to jump up to his floor and punish him for all the shit he put us through. Problem is, if he's got a good shot at you, he's taking it, and he takes away a lot of health, so you have to avoid him. What I tend to do is get close, force push him down with the Force, and blast him with weaponry. Still, he is quite challenging, especially since he can't jump to your maximum potential. After he pays the price for his arrogance, we have completed all the side missions, and we are ready for the next development. Luke gathers everyone, and since the Disciples of Ragnos already drained the Force from every place mentioned in his journal, they're gonna have to go to some additional places he didn't mention. Reactive to how Rosh went missing, everyone this time will be traveling in pairs. So Jaden and Kyle are sent to the planet Vajun, and anyone who knows about Dark Empire will know exactly where we're going, as initially Kyle is confused, but Luke explains that one of his father's castles lay there. Kyle alludes to Dark Empire to Jaden by mentioning that apparently Luke went to Vajun once, but he never really talked about it. I guess indicating that that part of Dark Empire was kept a secret. Still, exploring the interior of Vader's castle in a video game is a pretty exciting premise for the next story mission. That's where we land on Vajun. Although the thing is, if you didn't invest in Force Protect, this mission is going to become at least 25% harder, and that's because Vajun has so much acid rain outside. On top of that, we get these puffed up stormtroopers with the heavy weapon Rax possess. The upside is that once we kill them, we can collect the weapon and use it against future enemies. The atmosphere is pretty good, and it gives the vibe that we're getting the lead up to something. We go to town on a lot of enemies, such as tough-ass Dark Jedi, and the goal of staying out of the acid rain as much as possible gives us a huge obstacle. If you don't have Force Protect, the best medicine is Force Speed. However, you'll have to be prepared for the puffed up trooper ready to blast you with their heavy weapon. I believe you can deflect their weapon if you use Force Push at the right time, but this is impractical, since the weapons and force powers have to be selected side by side, and this is before weapon wheels were common in games. That's why I commonly have to prepare for an encounter with one force power before I actually jump into battle. So yeah, it's a tad impractical, but it in no way kills the game, and again, this is before weapon wheels were common. Across the level, we'll be blocked by TIE bombers, and so we have to fight our way to a turret. That will allow us to take out the bombers, in which we'll then rush all the way to the inside of Vader's castle. Afterwards, we don't have to worry about any more rain, but that doesn't make things less difficult. The doors are locked, and we're forced to go down a garbage chute to find a way across the castle. Navigating the castle is mostly interesting, and I even recall there being banter from two stormtroopers, in which they talk about how Vader apparently used stormtroopers for lightsaber practice when he was alive. While humorous, it's referencing one of my most hated tropes. Anyways, we basically make our way up and up, avoiding being fried in the water by electricity, and then we're proceeding to avoid laser beams that are conveniently here to annoy us. We get split up from Kyle, and we have to continue the third stage of Vajun without Kyle. Now, the third portion is probably the most fun. We've got lots of Dark Jedi to fight, as well as varied enemies like various combat droids, and we even come across the destroyed statue of Darth Vader, with Jaden remarking that someone didn't like Vader much, and only by reading Dark Empire will you learn exactly what happened here. We conveniently get some equipment before the boss battle, and as one probably predicted, Rosh along with two buff cultists from the start are draining force energy from Vader's meditation chamber. Yeah, so Rosh predictably turned to the dark side in a nanosecond, and proclaims to Jaden how Kyle was holding them back. And Rosh becomes even more shallow and unlikable before he proceeds to activate his now red lightsaber and attack us, along with the two cultists. Yeah, so we're forced to fight Rosh. The trick is that you need to kill his two sidekicks first, as they will heal Rosh in the middle of a battle, undoing any damage you did against him. Although it's hard to get a hit on the two cultists since they'll push you away and dodge most of your attacks, still, it's not overly annoying, and it's not like Super Star Wars where they have enormous health bars, and in fact, when you've taken the two cultists out, you can go to town on Rosh, although upon defeating him, Kyle shows up, and it's revealed who leads the Disciples of Ragnos. Yeah, it's Desan's apprentice from the last game, Tavion, who steps in to save Rosh at the last second, and Tavion reveals that she now decided to serve Marka Ragnos, who could offer her more power than Desan ever could, and gloats in Jaden's face, as Rosh willingly joins Tavion, and upon doing so they both escape. But not before Tavion destroys Jaden's lightsaber, and he and Kyle are caved in which Jaden used Kyle's lightsaber to cut a hole and escape. Yep, so obvious plot point is obvious, although at least the second twist wasn't so obvious. Tavion being the leader makes sense, and they do heavily reference the last game, in which she's spiteful at how Kyle spared her life. Anyways, back at the Jedi Academy, we piece most things together. Since Tavion is the leader, the cultists may have Desan's leftover Dark Jedi from the Empire Reborn, and as well as that, Tavion may be empowering the Dark Jedi with a Scepter of Ragnos, which she possesses. Luke then proceeds to promote Jaden straight up to Jedi Knight, which feels like quite an accomplishment despite it being one line of dialogue, and Kyle congratulates Jaden, although he warns him about how he felt his anger during his duel with Rosh, and warns him about the lure of the dark side. So next we've got to construct a new lightsaber, and we've got additional options this time. We can go to a dual wielding position, or the double-bladed saber, and this was all part of the game's gimmicks, at how it improves over Jedi Outcast. I have spoken a lot about the level design, but not much about the lightsaber combat, but let me tell you, that these two additional saber types does significantly improve the combat. It's worth noting that you won't be the only one with the advantage if you choose so. Honestly, I learned that having the double-bladed saber was actually the best, and I'll explain as we get into the first mission, in which we're sent to the tomb of an unnamed Jedi Knight on Chandrilla. As soon as we enter the Endless Canyon, we force push a rock, in which a mercenary is unfortunate enough to meet his demise, and then we're faced with a level 3 Dark Jedi. Now this is why the double-bladed saber is best, and that's because it can break through defenses twice as easily. You can also kick enemies to the ground if you wish, but that's the appeal of the double-bladed lightsaber. The dual wielding doesn't have that same appeal, so yeah, the double-bladed saber is efficient. I suppose you could use a single hilt again, but that's really if you want to challenge yourself only. If you're granted an opportunity to upgrade, you better take it. This level is probably one of the most challenging, as there's a deep chasm that is an instant death, as well as inexperienced Dark Jedi that pop up to challenge you, and the level is longer than usual, and the checkpoint system doesn't make things much easier, because if you fall or get slashed in half, it's all the way back to the checkpoint. But even making it to the checkpoint is difficult to an extent. Past the checkpoint, you'll actually need to pull off a perfectly timed force speed jump, which utilizes both powers. After jumping around for a while, we eventually enter the Jedi Knight's tomb, in which we proceed to close the tomb for good, and we're forced to get out as the area collapses in on itself. But however, we have stopped the Disciples of Ragnos from even thinking of siphoning force power from this tomb. Well done. Here's a cookie. Anyways, next mission, in which we're taken to the spaceport of Tanab to investigate sightings of cultists in the area. As one might suspect, however, they have an evil plan, and that's unleashing a mutated, near-unkillable Rancor on the spaceport. Yeah, so now this becomes a chase mission, in which we are the prey. The mission requires you to act fast, and escape from the Rancor, and the Rancor with its mutations will bust open the doors and will make its way over to you. It causes so much chaos in the spaceport, and delayed flights are probably the least of everyone's concerns, as we figure out how to trap the Rancor in between a large crate and a force field generator. It has to be well timed, however, as you'll have to do it again if the Rancor isn't in line to be killed. If I had to describe this level, it's pure chaos. The Rancor is large and intimidating, and being upgraded with level 3 force powers doesn't make it any less threatening, although I'd say the sandworms were worse. This might ironically be one of the most enjoyable levels in the whole game as a matter of fact. There's a rush and a panic, and the Rancor destroys things to get to you, and there's a ton of Dark Jedi to slow yourself down. Superb. Next, we've got a mission to destroy a cloaking device on the lost world of Yalara, which was lost to begin with because the cloaking device masked it. Anyways, when it seems like nobody's home, we enter through the front door, and are met with a strange sight. A Nogri warrior holding a fart gun. Yeah, what else could it be? It shoots toxic green gas that sounds like it comes from your ass. It's a fart gun. Despicable Me style.
I am not afraid of your jelly guns.
Oh, this ain't a jelly gun, sunshine.
Despite the fart gun not being what you'd expect, that's the weapon the Nogri are equipped with. You'll also see the Imperials and cultists fighting against the Nogri. So the Nogri here aren't caught up to speed on modern galactic history, since this is canonically 5 years after the Thrawn trilogy. You'll have to climb the tower to get to the top, and there's actually a bit with some spinning fans, which I'm guessing is the air conditioning system. I always wondered how that worked in Star Wars, but upon getting to the top, we rig the cloaking device with bombs and do a leap of faith, presumably into the water. This mission was pretty fun, and next we're met with an absolute banger. We're sent on a mission with Kyle to the destroyed asteroid system where the planet Biss was for safety, but the Imperial remnant is there and catches the Raven's Claw into a tractor beam, and so we've got to break free. So it's killing Imperials, some of which with big guns, avoiding traps, and then deactivating the tractor beam, and then going to the bridge to take out some TIE fighters that attack the ship, before everything goes to self-destruct mode and we gotta escape. I don't have much to say about this particular mission. It's got good pacing, it's fun, and it's straightforward. Certainly beats the confusing level design of every game previously in the series. Now, as you probably expected, then comes the last side mission before we get the final story sequence, and that involves us heading over to the waste of Orn Mantell to destroy old supplies of weapons, so they don't fall into the wrong hands. The place is pretty much abandoned, and it is for the most part, but you know there's always got to be a catch, and boy oh boy is there a catch. In fact, it's the ultimate catch. As we proceed to start blowing the first cache up, a certain bounty hunter comes down with a jetpack to confront us. You want to know who it is? Why yes, it's none other than Bobby Fett. Bobby gives Jaden the option to walk away, but upon Jaden's refusal, Bobby springs into action, and man is he quick on his feet, despite his weight. So yeah, we've got to destroy all the caches in the area. All the while Bobby Fett chases us, and he will always know where you are. The mission is a straightforward cat and mouse fight, as Bobby Fett is invincible for most of the mission. But upon destroying the last cache, we are forced to fight the obese bounty hunter in order to escape. He has the jetpack, but he's also got a flamethrower, and easily switches between weapons, such as a rocket launcher. He's a more beefed up jet trooper, but is reasonably defeatable. And upon defeating him, he decides he's done with us, as he remarks that, after all, there's no bounty on our head, and flies away. Since Kyle met Boba Fett in Dark Forces, he calls back to that moment in the end mission briefing, before we are urgently called back to the Jedi Temple, in which Luke has figured out what Tavion is doing with the scepter. She's going to use the scepter to resurrect Marka Ragnos, and explains that, according to legend, if enough force energy is infused into a body, the cells might regenerate, bringing whoever back to life. With that being said, we're all heading to Korriban. And again, I have to note Dave Filoni's lethal mistake with assuming that the name Korriban was lost by thousands of years, which wasn't true. But this video ain't about Dave Filoni. I just wanted to mention him. Anyways, before we head to Korriban to stop the Disciples of Ragnos, Kyle informs us that he's received an urgent distress signal from Rosh, where he's being held captive on Taspa 3. Jaden points out that it may be a trap, but Kyle objects that he's not willing to let Rosh die there if it isn't, and gives Jaden the ultimatum to help out or not, and Jaden decides he's coming. So yeah, before the main event, we make it to Taspa 3, which is a lava planet. Same deal here. There isn't really much story in the first half of this planet. It's fighting our way past enemies of all types and avoiding the lava. It's pretty challenging with the Dark Jedi and puffed up troopers they throw at you, and to be honest, the checkpoint system is scarce like a lot of levels, but eventually, after all that nonsense, we make it to the second half, in which Allura is there to greet us. She continues to be that smug shit talker, taunting us about Rosh. She eventually throws us his lightsaber, and we're forced to fight to get to Rosh. This place is basically a large factory, filled with Dark Jedi and Imperials, and we use our advanced force skills to the test. Allura will taunt us at every stop we make, until we make it to a certain platform, and find Rosh. Although despite agreeing to come along with Kyle, Jaden is incredibly pissed. Rosh tries to insist that he was wrong, and asks to be taken back to the Academy. Although Jaden isn't buying it so quickly. Jaden reminds him that he tried to kill him, and he was always so arrogant and thinking he was hot shit. Allura encourages Jaden to finish Rosh, although Kyle from afar steps in to warn Jaden about the lure of the dark side, and as you might expect, we're being set up for two endings. We can either deactivate our lightsaber, or attack Rosh with it. And so the game is split into two endings, both of which take us on a parallel path. So I'll talk about them side by side. The decision goes pretty much as you expect. Believe it or not, I was initially tempted to go with the dark side ending first because I hated Rosh, but then I realized I could just double back through save files later. So yeah, I initially spared Rosh, and in the light side ending, Allura decides to attack us since we won't be turned, resulting in Rosh's arm being cut off. In the dark side ending, Jaden attacks Rosh, and despite the attempts to beg for his life, Jaden's had enough of him, and then impales him.
Jaden, no!
And it's gone!
But that doesn't mean that Jaden's part of the Disciples of Ragnos, as he then aggressively remarks that the Scepter of Ragnos belongs to him, and he's not going to serve Marka Ragnos or Tavion. In fact, he thinks he should be in charge. A notable change is how the voice actor puts on a dark, aggressive voice post-fall to the dark side. But basically, in both versions, it's a fight with Allura, who is the same in both versions. She isn't too hard if you can break through her defenses like I can, but otherwise she's a reasonable challenge, and it's satisfying to put this hench girl in her place, although of course the context is different in both versions. In the light side outcome, Kyle shows up to help Rosh, and Jaden has to go to Korriban. Although he asked Kyle to tell Rosh he said thanks for making him see past his anger. Of course, in the dark side outcome, there's no such interaction. After Jaden kills Allura, Kyle finds Rosh dying alone and comforts him before he dies. But Kyle immediately realizes what Jaden is doing now, and how he's got to get to Korriban. So yeah, Jaden in both versions heads straight to Korriban for the opposite reason. In the light side outcome, he'll meet up with his fellow Jedi, and they'll help us finish the Disciples of Ragnos. However, in the dark side outcome, his fellow students sense the dark side in Jaden, and Jaden opts to kill both of the Jedi who confront him. So yeah, the main difference is that in the dark side ending, everyone is against you, whereas in the light side ending, you'll be backed up by all the Jedi in the level. Regardless, the level design is mostly the same. You'll be using the Force to open up gateways, and the fact that not everyone is focused on you makes things interesting. Although obviously, it's mostly the same, just fighting the way to Marka Ragnos' tomb. Skipping right ahead to the confrontation with Tavion, Jaden opts to fight Tavion for either noble or selfish reasons. Either way, Tavion uses the scepter during the boss fight, and given it's a giant beam, jumping is required. Otherwise, she isn't very hard to take down. One of the main differences between the endings, however, is who we face at the end of the game. In the light side ending, Tavion refuses to concede, and so she uses the scepter to resurrect Marka Ragnos, who has as much of an intimidation factor as a Scooby-Doo villain. He spouts some generic bad guy dialogue, and then opts to possess Tavion, which results in her death. Yeah, the villain kills his own men cliche. So then we have a boss fight against Marka Ragnos in Tavion's body. He's a bit beefed up, but obviously he's not at full power. And after we defeat him, he spews some more generic dialogue about how he would have returned if it weren't for us, the meddling Jedi. And so he's forced back into his tomb. The story then closes with Luke and Kyle congratulating Jaden, and we see Rosh get a new arm, as Jaden is honored as a Jedi, while Rosh gets his lesson about the easy pursuit of power. So yeah, happy ending. And it's kind of generic and boring. Nothing is really accomplished aside from Jaden fulfilling his potential as a Jedi, and that being it. Rosh doesn't appear ever again, and I think we all know why, but speaking of Rosh, he was wasted. He's probably one of the most hateable expanded universe characters, and fortunately, they learned their lesson and didn't feature him in anything else. With that being said, however, what a piss poor arc. An arrogant Jedi in training falls to the dark side, and then changes his mind, and the final choice of the protagonist is based around that. This is probably the time that the bad ending is better than the good ending, because in the dark side ending, upon defeating Tavion, she decides not to beg for mercy again, and accepts her fate as Jaden cuts her down. Then Kyle shows up, insisting that he can still turn away from the dark side, although Jaden doesn't listen. Jaden has a personality change of course from his dark side act, and talks like an evil bad guy. Not as generic as Marka Ragnos, but still not very good. Obviously we as the now bad guy fight our former master, and well, it's an instant improvement story-wise, because we spent the whole game training under Kyle. Kyle also has a unique moveset where if he gets too close, he grabs and beats us up. He also is actually harder than Marka Ragnos, since he utilizes light side powers to his advantage, like heal, protect, and absorb, which I didn't talk about, but basically absorb regenerates force powers if someone tries to use any power against you. Although it's probably the second worst power behind dark side rage, which is literally a self-defeating power that drains your health, even if you get a boost up. Anyways, Kyle is the better boss fight as well as the emotional stakes being way better. However, as you might expect, Jaden manages to defeat Kyle, shooting the scepter at him, burying him with a pile of rocks, all before leaving. Luke comes in, asking Kyle if he's alright. Now this scene is actually probably one of the best in the game, and it makes me wonder if the dark side ending should have been the canon one, since they confirm in a novel later down the line that Jaden chose the light side. In this scene, Kyle admits with great shame that Jaden took the scepter and killed Rosh. After knowing that he lost both his students in the worst way possible, he reflects self-doubt to Luke. He isn't sure he should be teaching at the Academy, and it's not like he's been the perfect Jedi himself, to which Luke responds,
No, Kyle. Yoda and Ben were both great teachers. Yet even they lost students.
And that, my friends, is how you know how out of character Luke was in The Last Jedi. Despite not being the canon ending, the dark side ending of Jedi Academy is an incredibly accurate representation of both Luke and Kyle, and how they would realistically respond to this situation. Luke reminds Kyle that even the best Jedi Masters can lose students. And this is definitely applicable to the films, with Yoda losing Count Dooku to darkness and Obi-Wan with Anakin. This one line says a lot about Luke's optimism, and is a perfect line of defense against Jake Skywalker defenders. They conclude this version of the ending with Kyle stating that he's taking a leave of absence from the Academy to hunt down Jaden and have the scepter destroyed, as we see Jaden take over the Imperial Remnant with the scepter in his possession. The end. So that's Jedi Academy, and while it is an inferior story to Jedi Outcast, it's still a damn good game. The improved lightsaber combat and refinement to Jedi Outcast, as well as the decision to give us the lightsaber right off the bat, made Jedi Academy the most accessible and enjoyable game in the Jedi Knight series for most players. Not to discredit the other four, but you do need to be in the right mindset to play those games. While Jedi Academy is a game you can play whenever, and since they ported this and Jedi Academy to the Switch, you can play it on the go potentially. I played the PC version, and I have to say the game was damn impressive. It's probably one of the most fun Star Wars games out there. It's far from story rich, but the level design and gameplay is rivaled by few other Star Wars games I have played, and I have played a shitload. The premise alone already puts you through the fantasy of becoming a Jedi and learning the ways of the Force. The additional saber types also instantly made this far more moddable than Jedi Outcast. And this is why Jedi Academy is where the modding scene is at best, and not Jedi Outcast, because it made all the right improvements to gameplay. I'd say this is in the top 4 modded Star Wars games, behind Knights of the Old Republic, Battlefront 2, and Empire at War. And for the vanilla Jedi Academy, it gets an easy 9 out of 10. Same as Jedi Outcast, but the point is retracted for such a lackluster story. But still, the variety and the improvements to the previous game was enough to hold me over. Plus a lot of good references to stories like Dark Empire was a nice touch. Alright, so that's the Jedi Knight series. This wasn't originally supposed to be the end, because they wanted to make a third entry called Jedi Knight 3 Brink of Darkness. But of course, Jim Ward was appointed as president of LucasArts and canned a lot of projects through an audit. So LucasArts was in a hard position, but it wasn't like they were done for. They just had a stumble that set them back years, and they were well on their way to recovering before the dark times. Before Disney. Anyways, now that I'm done with the Jedi Knight series, the next game in line is Empire at War, as voted by my audience in a poll I did a long time ago. That means that it'll also be followed by the game's Forces of Corruption expansion, and after that, I'll see what you want me to do next. Knights of the Old Republic 2 is also in line as well, so don't worry about that. With that being said, I'm JJ Plagiarisms, and until next time, what are stories but mystery boxes?
Under the mountain.